For those of you who are not familiar, End FGM European Network, we are the umbrella body for NGOs, community-based organisations who are working to end FGM and so support survivors in Europe and globally. So we have 27 members across Europe in 13 different countries, and we really provide a platform for our members to come together, to share experiences. We all are really committed to one core thing, which is ending FGM and other forms of gender-based violence and supporting the survivors. So we really provide that platform, that common ground for people to come together and to speak behind one united voice. So it's really important. And I think that is one of the reasons why, this webinar is taking place today, that we see ourselves as that meeting ground to bring together researchers, professionals, activists, NGOs, all together in one kind of space to discuss really key issues that are coming up. So I think, as many of you know, FGM is, it's a massive women's rights issue. There's 200 million women globally living as survivors of FGM. In Europe, we have data that there are 600,000 women in Europe who are living as survivors of FGM. But we know that that data is not complete because in some countries it's vastly, vastly underestimated. And one of the things that we want to ensure as the European network, that within the European Union and in Europe more broadly, and we also have a member in Switzerland, and we're aware that the UK will no longer be in the European Union, but we want to ensure that women, no matter where they live, have access to the quality of services that they deserve. So I think this is why this kind of the whole area of clitoral reconstruction surgery is of huge interest to us, because as a network, and many of our members share similar, we get so many contacts from women, survivors of FGM, weekly, monthly, asking for more information on the surgery. There are lots of misconceptions. When we talk to policy advisors or politicians in different countries, there's kind of, again, there's no real common information. And we feel that now is a really important time to start having a discussion on the surgery, kind of discussing what exactly is it, and then looking at the kind of the evidence and looking at the situation in the different European countries in particular. As you will note in the kind of the email I sent out, and Annemarie will be speaking more to this, there are 4 countries in particular. The surgery is available through the National Healthcare Service, so that would be France, Belgium, Germany and Sweden. And in other countries, it's viewed differently. And that's what concerns us as a network, because we want quality of access and equal access to any woman who's undergone FGM. And we feel it's really important to start to have this conversation. So today is all about learning. It's about kind of sharing with each other experiences. And we have 2 amazing presenters that I'm really honoured to have with us on the webinar today. So firstly, I will introduce you separate. So firstly, I think many of you on this call will know our first presenter, if not personally, but by name. So Dr. Pierres Foldès, I think he is very well known in this community. He is by profession a urologist, but he is also the co-founder of the Women's Safe Institute, which is the first multidisciplinary care centre in France, and this was set up in 2014. And outside of that, I think, we're so fortunate to have Dr. Pierre with us today, because he is, he is the person who developed this procedure that we are talking about, that could restore the clitoral reconstruction, and that could restore sensation by removing scar tissue and resurfacing the clitoris. But I know he's going to explain more to us about that. But I know as a network, we're really honoured that you have given your time. Because I know you're super busy, you're practicing, you're kind of running the centre, but yeah, we really value inviting you on here to this webinar to really explain, the surgery, the approach, and to really ensure that we all have a common understanding when we do refer to clitoral reconstruction. So, Dr. Pierre, I'm going to hand over to you, and thank you again. So.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I will make a short presentation on surgery, but just before starting, I will precise a very important thing. I'm not a promoter of surgery. I just try to do something to imagine what is possible to do. But to promote a surgery, you need evidence-based health and evidence-based medicine. And this is an ongoing program. So I make a short presentation. I make the PowerPoint if you want. Is it okay for you? Everybody can see? So I start with some definitions on anatomy and pathology. I will try to simply tell you how we can try to reconstruct a clitoris. We go through the holistic management because the very important topic is holistic and global management. And we will finish with incoming issues. Our experience, we started in 82 in Burkina Faso. We discovered this time we don't know anything about the clitoris, so I went back to France for anatomical research to try to find what is a normal clitoris. We started the procedures in 84 and made many missions in West and also in East Africa where you have type 3. We discovered the ultrasound imaging procedures in 2000. It was very, very helpful to show to the victims what is the real state before starting the procedure. And we obtained in 2004 the full coverage by social health insurance. First publication 2004. We introduced the needle reconstruction in addition to clitoral reconstruction in 2006. Our publication for near 3,000 cases in 2012. We opened the Women's State Institute in 2014, and this changed everything. I will explain in detail. At this time, we saw 16,000 cases in consultation and operate only 6,000. So we don't operate, obviously. So the clitoris, it is now how we can consider the normal anatomy of clitoris. You can see it's more complex than only the gland here. And it's a deep body going through the whole perineum, and the bulb are surrounding the vagina. What do the scissors? The scissors only they cut partially the knee and part of the gland, and you see at the end they touch in 90% of the cases the lips also. So what is the situation? When you cut, you detach the clitoris from the skin and you obtain this situation. The black thing is the pubic bone. It's the rest of the scar of the remaining part of the clitoris is attached to the bone like this. And if you see the consequences in delivery, it's a drawing of a delivery. You see the blue line is pushing the head of the baby. You have two issues. The first issue is the attachment of the remaining part of the clitoris to the pubic bone. And the second one is what we call the pseudo-infibulation. But even in West Africa, in mostly 80 to 90% of the cases, you have injury to the lips and a closure of the vulva, and in a delivery condition, this exposes the perineum. So, when you start to a single injury to the clitoris, you may have consequences of the whole vulva. This is a normal gland of the clitoris. You can notice you have the main trunks coming up, surrounding the top of the gland, and they go down like this. So when it is cut like this, you don't have injury to the main trunks. This is a very important detail. This is a ultrasound of excised women. You can see the urethra, the corpus, and you see the gland is still there. It's not the whole gland, the partial gland surrounded with tissues. The principle of reconstruction, you start with the A drawing like this. So you have the attachment to the pubic bones. The surgery consists in dissecting the remaining part of the gland, putting it in a normal situation, and making dorsal sutures to prevent the gland to go back up. This is the publication on the Lancet, almost 3,000 cases. At this time, we only consider result at 6 months, and the operated women notice that in 80 to 85% of the cases, you have a normal or something emerging clitoris without or with a hood in 85% of the cases. For the functional results, we were at this time, we have an estimation on the FSFE index at 77% of the cases of sometimes climax or real improvement of the sexuality, but we will discuss in detail because these change a lot, namely with the global management added. To summarize, an FGM reconstruction is not only a clitoris reconstruction, it's first a defibrillation, even in a type 2, clitoral reconstruction, labial reconstruction, and perineal reconstruction. But if you do that, you do only the beginning because it's a first talk during the consultation. You add the psychological assistance and management, sexology, and even the social or justice. So it's a double holistic approach. This can summarize the whole thing. It's not a pathology. It's not a pathology. It's a crime. It's a social event. So you go through the first consultation. This first consultation is very, very important because it's back to voice. It's a meeting or a mediation. In this case, you chose or not to go to surgery. In our theory, it's 1 on 3 patients. If you go to surgery, you have to notice it's a real global process because the aim is to be back to the society. First, with the post-operative care, it is quite complex with psychological support. The post-traumatic care, because those victims are often victims of other kind of violences, and the sexual support. You may have an obstetrical follow-up. You have to talk with the family, the partner is included in our management in our center, the parents, the sisters, and obviously the daughters. Sometimes you go to justice, sometimes you need to deal with media, but you have to deal with the community because this victim has to go back to the right place in the society. So in this center, the Women Safe Center, we add all the time the holistic process management. And first, we listen to the patient, the complaints, and the request. We inform. Information is the first aim to normal anatomy. What could be done? We never push, obviously, towards surgery. We tell about protection of children and evaluate the request. Surgery is a possible answer. For a long time, surgery has been questioned because it could have negative connotations for some. If we can fix it, tradition will continue. Because the surgery becomes highly technical and requires expertise. because you have a vast different type of FGMs, it's only one technique, not only one technique, because evolution and necessity of a constant technical evolution. It's require a real expertise. Huh? For commitment to repair, we speak out the necessary global management because all the forms of suffering and additional violences, the incoming issues are we are facing now emerging areas of practice in several countries like India, Indonesia. We have to face medicalization of excision because they had different kind of injuries. We have to deal with the famous type 4 incoming. The type 4 could be a real excision or a real non-excision, so we'll speak about it. And we have to face in our recruitment in non-traditional practice like war excision. Oh, I finished my presentation. I'm ready for the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pierre. Maybe what we can do is that we will take Annemarie's presentation as well, so that we can do all the questions at once, and we're having the maximum time possible for questions and answers. But thank you so much for that presentation. It was highly interesting, and I think it was really educational. I certainly learned a lot, and yeah, as we spoke previously, it's interesting to see, you know, in surgery, the role of so many actors, including the media, as well, because a lot of how this surgery is communicated to survivors is through the media. They're made aware of it. So there needs to be a real engagement, as you said, with the media and with these different actors when we are talking about the surgery. It's not just medical. So to complement Dr. Pierre's really great presentation, I'm delighted to welcome our second speaker to today's webinar, who I think is also quite well known to many of you. So Dr. Annemarie Middelburg, she's a passionate women's rights advocate and consultant from the Netherlands, and she has got huge expertise in the area of women's rights and female genital mutilation. Her own background is in public law and human rights, and she obtained her PhD thesis through looking at empty promises, compliance with the human rights frameworks in relation to FGM in Senegal. And Annemarie has, and she will explain it herself, has been really, I suppose, sparked an interest in this area in recent years. She has been working a lot with UN. She's worked also with us here at the End FGM European Network previously. But she is also looking into the issue of clitoral reconstruction surgery and is looking at developing a knowledge platform based on the premise that there isn't sufficient knowledge publicly available for the women and for the survivors and for others like in the profession as well. So yeah, I just want to welcome Annemarie, and she's going to give us a presentation as well. So you're very welcome, Annemarie. Thank you. Annemarie, you're just muted, sorry. Oh. Yeah, Annemarie, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. You were muted there.
Okay, good. So, and can you see my presentation as well?
Yes, it's very clear.
Perfect. So this is what I would like to do in my presentation. This is the outline. So I would like to let you know how I got involved in clitoral reconstructive surgery. I will introduce the topic to you in the European context. I will also present the current evidence. I will shortly address the guidelines that exist, including the WHO guidelines as well as the guideline in the United Kingdom. I will share with you my reflections on current evidence and finalize with my conclusion. So this is how I got involved. In June 2014, I was asked by the Conversation UK to interview Marcy Bowers about clitoral reconstructive surgery. So I had a few phone calls with her and I asked her many different questions and I published an article about it. Then in September 2015, I completed my PhD research on FGM, and during my PhD research, I already was in touch with many surgeons who perform the operation, and I also met many women, both in Europe as well as in the African continent, that underwent the operation. Then in October 2018, we had a debate in our parliament in the Netherlands about the surgery. And the question was whether the Netherlands government should cover the cost of the surgery. And then while this debate was taking place, I heard that there is a lack of scientific evidence about the effectiveness and the consequences of this operation, and that there were unacceptable complications. And this actually sparked my interest because this did not correspond with my own experiences, with all the interviews I conducted with surgeons, but also with the experiences of the many women I got to know who were talking about the operation and who underwent the operation themselves. So in October this year, I wrote an article in Dutch that was published in Medisch Contact. And the title is Clitoral Reconstruction After FGM Should Be Covered by Health Insurance. I wrote this article together with Dr. Rifat Karim and Judith Dekker, who are the ones who perform the clitoral reconstructive surgery in the Netherlands. So they have a lot of knowledge about the operation. And this month, in December 2019, I am planning to submit an article that we wrote together to publish in a scientific journal about clitoral reconstructive surgery. As an introduction, there is an increasing demand for clitoral reconstructive surgery after FGM. And there is a small but a growing number of doctors that performs the surgery. Now, if you ask the question, how many women worldwide would have undergone the operation, I would say that it will be a few thousand of women who have had FGM and who underwent reconstructive surgery. The operation is, as far as I know, available in Europe, the United States, and some countries in Africa. As Fiona also said, the operation is covered by national health insurance by some countries in the European Union, but not all. The countries that I've found where the operation is covered are France, Belgium, Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland. In case the operation is covered by health insurance in your country as well, if you're listening, but it's not included in the list, please let me know. But this is what I could find. Now, I think we all know the impact of FGM. It has physical, psychological, and sexual consequences. And I think we also all know that sexuality and FGM is closely connected. So in many parts of the world, FGM is performed to control women's sexual desire. And this is a quote of a girl I interviewed in Senegal, a mother actually, and she said, "A girl who is not excited will run wild and disgrace her family." Now, the reason why FGM is very often performed is that women who have undergone FGM will not seek sexual relations outside marriage. Now, what is very important, and this is something I would like to stress, is that not all women who have undergone FGM experience sexual problems. There are many studies that indicate that a proportion of the affected women are still able to experience a psychologically and also physically fulfilling sexual life. So this is also very important to take into consideration when we are talking about this surgery. Now, what is the current evidence in relation to clitoral reconstructive surgery? this is how I did my research. I composed an Excel file and I included different columns, including the author, the title of the article, the year of publication, the study design, the limitations of the study, the amount of women that were included in the study, also the amount of women at follow-up, the time at follow-up, the expectations of the women before the surgery, the benefits of the operation, and also the complication rate. So I did a search of all articles that I could find about clitoral reconstructive surgery, and I did this exercise. Now, what did I find? First of all, the motivations for clitoral reconstruction. And I put as a first motivation, I found that this is the most important one, is restoration of female identity. Many women who undergo the operation have the feeling that their womanhood has been stolen or has been taken away. And they have a desire to feel complete, to feel a real woman, to feel a full woman again. And what I would like to share with you is that when I interview women who underwent the operation, when they start talking about why they want the operation, very often they get a sparkle in their eye, they go and sit straight, and they start talking very confidently about what the operation did to them. And I think this is really important. Another motivation is to restore sexual pleasure. And the last motivation is to reduce pain. Then I would like to move to the effectiveness of clitoral reconstructive surgery. When I take a look at all the literature that I could find about clitoral reconstructive surgery, I do see a positive trend in the results. Now, what are those positive trends? The visibility of the neoglands, improvement of sexual function, decreased vulvar pain, the improvement of clitoral function, and the improvement of body image and psychological well-being. So in many different studies that I found and that I included in my Excel file, these were the results. Then the complication rates, because you saw in my last column, in my Excel file, there were the complication rates. What I found was that there are minor complication rates. And here I listed the type of complications. So moderate fever, suture failure, mild local inflammation, and so forth and so on. When I take a careful look at all these studies, there are methodological limitations. So I do acknowledge that the existing literature has methodological limitations and shortcomings. First of all, there is a relatively low number of patients, and I put there relatively because I think the study of Dr. Foldès with more than 3,000 or almost 3,000 patients is not really a low number. A second methodological limitation is the short follow-up time. A third is the high loss of follow-up, which I think could be explained, but I will not go into depth in relation to that. The fourth limitation is the use of non-validated skills. That is or could be seen as a problem. The risk of bias due to participant selection and not having a comparison group. So those are the limitations and shortcomings that I have seen in all the articles, but those shortcomings and limitations have also been noted by other researchers. But what I would like to highlight again is, although we have these shortcomings and we can be very critical on the studies that have been done, the existing literature shows still a common positive trend in results. And I think that is really important. So when I did this study, it is so far so good. You know, there's a common positive trend in results. And then I was wondering, what do the guidelines tell us? So let me start with the WHO guideline on the management of health complications from FGM, which was published in 2016. On the slide, I also added a link to this report. So you can also, after this webinar, click on the link and read these documents by yourself. Now, WHO decided to issue no recommendation in relation to clitoral reconstructive surgery. WHO said, due to the lack of evidence and safety concerns, the GDG decided not to issue any recommendations regarding these interventions at present and strongly encouraged further research in these areas. Furthermore, WHO also said that the evidence for all measured outcomes was rated as being of very low quality. 3 studies reported complication rates that fluctuated between 5.3 and 23.6%. And then again, in addition to the unacceptably high rates of reported complications. Now, if you ask me what I think about the WHO guidelines, you need to know that those conclusions of WHO are based on a systematic review that was conducted in 2015. In this systematic review, 269 articles were found about reconstructive surgery. However, only 4 out of 269 studies were selected to be included in the review, which means that the other 265 studies were put aside. And I'm not criticizing the authors of this article, but I think it's very important for us, for people working in the field, to know that this is the case, that the WHO guideline is based on 4 studies. In addition to that, and I think that is really worrying, the complication rate, 23.4% and also 23.6% that are included in the WHO guideline is not coming from one of those articles. So I really don't know where this high complication rates come from. Another guideline is the UK Green Top guideline on FGM and its management, and it has a very similar conclusion. It says clitoral reconstruction should not be performed because current evidence suggests unacceptable complication rates without conclusive evidence of benefit. And then again, I wonder where the unacceptable complication rates specifically come from. My reflections. So first of all, I think the clitoral reconstructive surgery is a very sensitive topic, and the medical establishment is very skeptical. And I would like to give some examples. So here is a response to the article of Dr. Pierres Foldès, where some medical experts say that the claims that Dr. Foldès makes are anatomically impossible in cases of type 2 FGM. More specifically, what is written in the article is where the body of the clitoris has been removed, the neurovascular bundle cannot be preserved. There is therefore no reality to the claim that surgery can excavate and expose buried tissue. However, this observation is based on wrong assumptions and also a lack of scientific knowledge about FGM. If you know what type 2 FGM is, you wouldn't reach those conclusions, and I think that is really problematic. Another example of the skepticism of the medical establishment is that some medical experts describe the surgical procedure as a novel procedure or a new technique or a recent surgical technique with limited amount of poor evidence. That is how this operation is very often qualified. However, this observation is also based on wrong assumptions because it's not a new technique. There was already in the 1930s a surgical procedure on the clitoris. And what is also important is that it is not a difficult procedure, as Dr. Foldès explained, but quite a simple technique. If we take a look at the current evidence and those guidelines, I think it's quite problematic that existing guidelines in the United Kingdom, at the WHO, also in the Netherlands, are not aligned with scientific evidence. To my mind, healthcare professionals are more open-minded, judgmental, and also culturally sensitive in their approach to these women and explore their needs for surgery. Now, as Fiona said, I have a background in international human rights law, and we all know that FGM is qualified as a form of violence against women. It's a violation of various human rights, the right to health. FGM is qualified as a form of torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and so forth and so on. It's even included as a target in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what I find quite problematic is if you say that FGM is a human rights violation, this operation is possible. There is a positive trend in results. How could you explain to these women that they need to pay for this operation themselves in the majority of countries where this operation is provided? And then I ask myself, aren't we leaving those women behind? To my mind, any well-informed and competent adult women should be free to make a choice for reconstructive surgery of the clitoris after FGM. I also believe that the surgery should be covered by national health insurance in all EU countries based on the research that I did. But there are some important things to take into consideration. Not all women want this surgery. It's only a very small group of empowered women that has an interest in undergoing this surgery. Of those small group of women, a thorough patient selection is key. And this is also something that Dr. Foldès highlighted. An operation is not always necessary to address the needs of these women. Sometimes multidisciplinary care meets the needs and women decide after they have received this care, for example, sexual education, conversations with the sexologist, psychological counseling, that they don't need the surgery. Therefore, I also state that counseling and also managing the expectations before the surgery is fundamental. Why I really like the fact that we have this webinar today is that it is important to have a well-informed debate about this surgery. Not a debate based on opinions, because many people have very strong opinions about this operation. But let's stick to the facts. Let's stick to the scientific evidence and also the knowledge that we have. I think that's very important. Let us also try to look at the surgery in an unbiased way, how difficult it might be. What I find very frustrating is that survivors of FGM are very often portrayed as vulnerable women. But my experience is that these women are very strong and they are very much able to make a decision about the surgery themselves. The next point I already highlighted. So in the EU, there is a large variation between the countries. And to my mind, it should be better harmonized because it's actually not fair that if you are a woman in France, you can go to the clinic of Dr. Pierres Foldès and have the operation done. But in other countries that you need to pay for the operation yourself. I think this is really problematic. Also in terms of protection of human rights, the provision of services and care. And lastly, there also exists a knowledge gap. I feel that when I go to conferences, when I have conversations, that there is very often a lot of misinformation. And therefore, I got the idea to establish a knowledge platform about clitoral reconstructive surgery. So this is my own initiative that will be launched next year. And my aim is to share the knowledge that we have to survivors of FGM, also to health professionals, to policymakers, and to everybody who might be interested to know more about this operation. So that was it. That was actually what I wanted to present, and I really look forward to receive your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annemarie, for a really informative presentation. And I think, you know, it's one of the core reasons that we are having this webinar today is to see where next, that, you know, there's a lot of debate happening, that we really need to start bringing the conversations together and bringing them forward, because, you know, it's not acceptable that there is such a variation from country to country. And also under EU policy and legislation, under the Victims' Rights Directive, survivors of crime, including survivors of FGM, are entitled to certain, to certain services. And so, you know, legally, a survivor in one country could take a case under the Victims' Rights Directive. So I think that's plausible. And then the Istanbul Convention as well also gives certain rights to survivors of gender-based violence, including FGM. And I think as an advocacy network, we really want to advocate, you know, we need more research on FGM more broadly, but this is, you know, a really interesting area that more needs to be invested into also. But I'm really interested to hear if there are any questions for either Dr. Pierres Foldès or Dr. Annemarie Middelburg. So I'm going to throw it over to the participants. We have a lot of people from all over the world, I see, participating on the call, which is wonderful. But yeah, maybe if someone wants to ask a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I've got to turn my, I don't know if you can see me now.
Hey, Sarah.
It's Sarah O'Neill. Hi, Annemarie. Very nice to see you.
Yes.
Yeah, and a couple other people I've met from. So I've been, just to give you a little bit of background, I've been doing research with Martin Caillé in the clinic in Belgium for the last 2 years, and I've followed, I think, 159 consultations in total, which includes sexology, psychotherapy, but also the gynecological consultations and the first point of contact when women arrive at the clinic. So kind of the reception meeting, that's with Fabienne Richard as well. And so this is a little bit about so I've been following this. We haven't published yet, but we're drafting kind of, we're working on publications. I think they'll come out next year. But just a couple of things that I wanted to, or just one thing I wanted to say is kind of regarding one of the things that I've noticed in the clinic following these consultations is the retraction of the clitoris, which I think Pierres Foldès and also Dr. Karim may be able to comment on. So from what I've observed, or often when women feel, so of course there's the lack of evidence or the supposed risk of the surgery that the WHO talks about, but then also just from what I've observed in this clinic is some women coming in because after the clitoral reconstructive surgery, it sometimes happens, not in all cases, and I can, you know, there's no way I can give you a figure on this, an exact figure, and I think that's also why more research is needed, but just, you know, that is that is something that I've observed in a number of cases, women who are very unhappy because after the clitoral reconstruction, there's a risk of the new clitoris or the exposed clitoris retracting. And sometimes, so for example, Dr. Caillé has then pulled it out again. But again, you know, there's a risk of it even retracting. So this is one of the things that is often very frustrating for women from my experience in interviews with women. So it would be very interesting to hear Dr. Foldès, all three of you, you know, Annemarie and also Dr. Karim, just to comment on that observation that I've made. Thank you. That's it for now.
Thanks, Sarah. Just Dr. Foldès, there's another question by text that you might speak to as well. Someone has asked, are there differences in the kind of reconstruction operations performed in different EU countries? So both of them are quite technical, so maybe you can take both of them. And thank you for the comment, Sarah. Great to know that you're doing research also.
Okay, I can answer if you want.
Yes, please answer. Yeah.
It's very important for you. Hear me? You hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I will reply because the complication you notice is quite common. What you call the retraction, post-operative retraction. So obviously, and the ultrasound examination teach you what happens exactly in those cases. It's not exactly a retraction, but it's an excess of skin coverage. Because when you rebuild a neo gland, you will have two kind of coverage. First coverage is a normal cicatrization or above the gland. And it is added by the upcoming neo skin. So progress would be made in try to face this phenomenon and try to prevent the excess of coverage of the skins with selected creams and display regular message. So in our center, we carefully follow up, and we try to monitor this phase very carefully. If you do it carefully, you reduce in a vast proportion the excess of coverage. The second point I want to point out, it was been told that it was impossible to make a surgery because the body of the clitoris has been cut and the nerves removed. This is a very important point. I operate 3,000 cases, but before I make MRI, ultrasound study, and pathology examination. In more than 4,000 cases, I never saw any kind of injury to the body. The body is still there in every time, and I saw FGM from worldwide. So the body of the clitoris has never been removed, and the main tracts are still there. So I can prove it, and it could be a paper we will share. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much for responding. Very interesting. Thanks.
Dr. Pierre, the other question that you might be able to answer, Annemarie, also is there differences in the kind of reconstructive operations performed in different countries? So is it a common approach, or is it different from country to country?
Yes. It's a very important question also, because you can notice that different countries have different incomes and different kind of excision. Namely, in the UK, they have different kind of excision. They have barely type 2, but they are mostly type 3. And in the type 3, you have two communities. You have type 3 with you still have the clitoris nearly intact, and you have the real type 3 with deep injury to the clitoris. So you have different population. So you may have different surgical approaches. So the fact is, FGM is a vast domain with very different cases, and if we have a general technique, we have to make adaptation to every case. Namely, in the type 3, the type 4, the new type 4, or medicalized excisions, the technique is quite different, because you still have the normal coverage of the gland, and you have to open it and to reconstruct the clitoris behind the normal skin. It's much more difficult, but it's a different technique.
That's great. The next question, I think it's to, do you want to come in, Annemarie, actually? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because also during my search in many different European countries, I also noticed that there are some differences in the surgical technique that different surgeons use. So my understanding is that the golden standard, so to say, is still the technique developed by Dr. Pierres Foldès, but then there are differences between surgeons on how they do it. So, for example, I know that in Germany, Dr. O'Day, who I met a few months ago, is also very much reconstructing the labia. And his operation takes, for example, much longer, a few hours, compared to the operation that is offered in the Netherlands, where the women very often choose not to have their labia reconstructed. So there are differences in the technique that different surgeons use, which also result in a different time frame that the operation takes.
That's really interesting, and really, I think it's something that needs to be noted maybe more as well. So the next question is coming in from a doctor from Sweden. Dr. Petra, I'm not going to pronounce your surname, I wouldn't be able to, but and she is asked, if a woman seeking clitoral reconstruction surgery has satisfying orgasmic function, should she be advised not to undergo surgery due to risk of losing that very important function? And she works in a hospital that doesn't currently perform the surgery. Yes, so we'll take that question to both Dr. Pierre and Annemarie, and then there's another question that's coming in then. Do you want to answer it, maybe, Dr. Pierre, while we're waiting?
I could give an answer. Hello?
Oh, yes. Hello. Yes. Feel free.
Well, Dr. Curry, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly. Oh, I'm really sorry, we can't hear you now.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, the most important question I would ask the doctor is, if she was not an FGM woman, but a normal woman who came to your practice and wanted a clitoral hood reduction, would you do that?
It's a question.
No, sorry, Pierre. I'm just giving an answer to the question from Sweden.
She said it's a no.
So no. The point is that I think that the reconstruction is not the same as sexual function. You have to take it in consideration, but it does not have to be a negative advice. It depends on the patient's history, the patient's type of FGM, what she has gone through, and the surgical possibilities that we have. So you have to search her wish and discuss the technical possibilities before we decide to do a surgery. It's not a yes or no, it's reason for more information. What do you think, Pierre?
Yes. I can answer?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I can answer? Yeah, I fully agree with Karim. Exactly the same opinion. So women are the centers. What they claim is it's what they claim, and we have to follow it. We have not to induce any question about it. They choose, and we follow, and we propose a certain number of solutions. We have to discuss on it, to explain in details, but not push obviously towards surgery in any time. So concerning the hood, it could be discussed, it could be a danger, but usually we don't do anything because it could be better to prevent excess of surgery.
I agree.
Thank you both for that. I hope that has answered the Swedish colleague's question. Annemarie, is there anything you want to add? It was to this question?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
I'm just going to invite Jess Bonstein from the US has a question. Do you want to come? I can unmute you, Jess, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I would. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. This question is actually also from Deb Ottenheimer. We are surgeons in the U.S. And for Annemarie, in your review of the literature, what did you notice about the amount of postoperative follow-up or the amount of psychological support and how that impacted the outcomes? Was that mentioned in any of the studies you found?
Go ahead, Annemarie.
Hello?
Annemarie, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did hear the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, good. In relation to the amount of follow-up, I think the most important study is still the study of Dr. Pierres Foldès, and then the amount of follow-up is maximum 1 year still in relation to all the studies that I found. However, there is a very, very interesting study coming from Burkina Faso. Unfortunately, it is not yet published, but the surgeon in Burkina Faso followed his patients for, I believe, 2 to 5 years. And the outcome of his studies is very positive, very similar to the results of the study of Dr. Pierres Foldès in 2000, that was published in 2012. So that looks very promising. However, this study is not yet published, so it is not yet accessible. But I think that is quite important to take into consideration. In relation to psychological support, what I said before, I think this is really important to have this discussion about psychological support, about sexual education, about counseling. Because, as I said, there are some studies that show that once women have this support, they decide not to undergo the operation. And then indeed, for those type of women, the operation is not the answer to the need that they have. However, there is still a group of very empowered women that want to undergo this operation. And I think the operation should be offered to these type of women. One thing I would like to add, and I think that is very important, is that this operation is also offered not only to victims of or survivors of FGM, but also to women who had vulvar cancer. So there are quite some women who in Europe have cancer in their vulval area. And what happens is that everything is cut away when they undergo the operation to remove the cancer. And I had the honor to speak to one of the women who had vulvar cancer and who also underwent clitoral reconstructive surgery in the Netherlands. And it was a very interesting conversation, also because what she said about losing your female identity, about feeling a woman again after she had her clitoris restored, was so similar to the conversations I had with women who underwent the operation, the same operation who underwent FGM. So I think this is also very important because we need to understand the context, the cultural background. It has to do with autonomy as well, women deciding about their own bodies. So that was also an experience I just wanted to share. And I think it's important if we have the debate to also take into account that situation. So also on my knowledge platform that I'm going to launch in 2020, I will add a separate page also for women who who had vulvar cancer and have an interest and the same questions as survivors of FGM have in relation to the reconstructive surgery. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Annemarie. That's helpful.
Did you have another question that you wanted for Dr. Foldès as well, you said?
Could I add something?
Yeah, and sure.
Oh, I think Dr. Karim wants to add something before we move to the... Yeah, please add, yeah.
Okay, I
Yes.
can answer?
Yes.
Okay. Three things. We extend, like it was said, the survey and the follow-up up to 2 years and more. And the main thing is the psychological aspect is very, very important because the vast majority of those victims are victims from other kind of violence like enforced marriage and intra-familial violences. And if you don't deal with this, you have less results even in the surgery. So it's very important. And another kind of victims we didn't notice is the minors, the girls under 18. It is a very important topic in France because we need the permission of the parents, and it is an ongoing discussion, and we could discuss on it. And finally, I operate personally 12 cases of vulvar cancer and clitoral cancer, and we could do reconstructive surgery of clitoris after cancer, and I can add my data to those of Netherlands. It could be a very interesting papers because we keep all the data for this. Thank you.
That's great. It's good to see that there might be concrete collaborations after this webinar also. Jess, your second question.
Thank you so much. The second one is more broad for both Dr. Karim and Dr. Foldès. What would you say are the most important lessons you have learned throughout your cases of clitoral reconstruction or restoration, as you developed your surgical technique over the years?
Rafat could answer, I can answer. It's very simple. The first lesson, the first benefit is to know exactly what a clitoris and to know exactly what the real consequences of excision, because before this work, people could say, oh, it's nothing, it is not important for women. We can scientifically demonstrate it's a real crime, it's a real deep injury, and we have to face it. So the main benefit of this is to know exactly what's an excision, and our goal is End FGM.
Dr. Karim, do you want to add anything?
Well, yes, I'd like to add, I agree with Pierre 100%, but what is important, what I've learned is you really have to listen to the wishes of the patient. Because when I started, I used Pierre's technique, but I wanted to make something which anatomically fits. But it is more important to listen to what the patient needs than what the doctor wants. I think that's the most important lesson I've learned. Because if you know the anatomy, it's not a difficult surgery. But you have to be sensitive to the wishes of the patient. That is the most important thing that I have learned.
Thank you both. Very interesting. We have another question, which I think Dr. Pierres Foldès and Annemarie as well might have some thoughts, but it's on from Giselle from Canada on what are the new type 4 FGM. So you mentioned, Dr. Foldès, in your presentation the new types of FGM under type 4. So if you want to speak to that, and I think Annemarie also has commented on that in the past. So yeah, if you both want to answer that question.
Yes, Annemarie first.
Well, I think this is a comment that is focusing on your presentation. What my understanding is that if you want to undergo a clitoral reconstructive surgery, the clitoris has been damaged during the FGM, and the operation is meant to restore the damage that has been done to the clitoris. So if you, as a woman, have undergone any type of FGM, but your clitoris is not touched, so we do know of some cases of type 3 FGM, while they cut away the labia and then sew the woman, but then they don't touch the clitoris, then the clitoris is still intact. And then the clitoral reconstructive surgery is not a solution to the problem that this woman has. And therefore, I also always make a clear distinction between defibrillation, so opening the woman, and clitoral reconstructive surgery, because the clitoral reconstructive surgery is focusing on the clitoris as an organ. And I think in relation to FGM type 4, it's also important to see whether the clitoris has been damaged and whether the clitoral reconstructive surgery could be a solution in order to undo the damage that has been done to the organ. So that's how I understand it, but I'm sure that there are two experts, Dr. Pierres Foldès and Dr. Karim, who can also add to my response.
I can answer for type 4. Hello?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. The type 4 is a vast variation of different forms because in the medicalization of the practice, you may face a single incision of the skin without any injury to the clitoris. But in other cases, with the same aspect, you may have a severe injury behind a normal situation of the skin. So we have some very simple clinical or ultrasound technique to detect what is the real aspect and the real what happens really to the clitoris behind, and we have to adapt the solution. But I fully agree with Karim. We first have to listen to the victims. Some once, some doesn't once. They are the centers. We have just to help them and not impose our point of view.
That's great. And I think for those who are interested as well, there is a community of practice on FGM that has recently done a discussion on type 4 FGM. So I will put it in the comment box, a link to the community of practice that is run by GAMS in Belgium, which could be interesting to those who are interested in type 4. There's another question from Sarah O'Neill in relation to, is type 1 ever operated on? So has anyone any evidence in your clinics? Do you ever operate on type 1?
It's a question for me?
Yes, I think it's a question to all of you, but whoever wishes to answer. Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
So normally we don't operate type 1, but there are some frontier cases between type 1 and type 2, and sometimes you have to sometimes do surgical repair to the lips and slightly touch to the clitoris, but normally we don't operate type 1.
It's the same here.
Yeah, okay.
Is there anyone else on the call who has the experience on type 1, just for comparison?
It's the same here. I do not operate type 1.
Yeah.
Well, but there are cases that are fluent. It goes to 1 to 2, you know. Sometimes it's difficult, but normally you don't.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Sarah says thank you as well. Any other questions? I can unmute, or people can continue to type. Yes, there is a question for Annemarie. So you mentioned FGM is included in the SDGs under SDG 5. Yes, that's right. And those are set to be accomplished by 2020. Do you know of any measures that are being taken to achieve this goal by 2030?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
No, so it's indeed the case that ending both FGM and child marriage is part of the target under Sustainable Development Goal number 5. And there are many actions taken in order to try to achieve the goal. I think, to be honest, that the goal is very ambitious, but without ambitious goals, we will never reach the goal that we have to totally eliminate the practice. But as you probably know, there are many NGOs working in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, also in Europe, actually all over the world, to try to eliminate the practice. Of course, as Dr. Pierres Foldès said as well, prevention is much more important and is most important in this regard. So there are a lot of initiatives, raising awareness, education is of course key, involving all different stakeholders, all different actors, including men, religious leaders, health professionals, everybody. Then we also have the UNICEF UNFPA joint program that is taking a lot of initiatives and supporting countries in order to end FGM. So yes, a lot of actions are being taken in Europe, in Africa, in other parts of the world in order to try to reach the goal. Quite interesting in that regard was the ICPD 25 conference in Nairobi, where we mapped what progress we have achieved in the past 25 years. I was also present at this conference, and it was quite interesting to see which steps we have taken in the past years in order to end FGM. So the campaign started about 20 years ago. Many achievements have been done, but there's also still a lot of work to do. The UNFPA estimations are quite depressing, I must say, that 68 million girls will undergo FGM between now and 2013, which is like a huge amount. So yes, a lot has been done, but there's still also a lot of work to do. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Annemarie. Yeah, and just to add, a lot of the work that the network does is also focused on scaling up efforts to achieve this SDG, because as Annemarie said, we are progressing, and certain communities, you know, are moving away from FGM, but unfortunately, due to population growth, we're actually more women are going to be cut than we are saving, if I can put it like that. So we really need to scale up efforts. Globally, you know, FGM was for so long such a taboo topic. And I think now at least politicians, policymakers are discussing it, but it needs more investment, and it needs really to be scaled up. And the complex thing about ending FGM is that every community practices for a different reason. Even within the same clans or tribes, sometimes you find variation on why people practice. So it's very intensive work at community level. Yeah, so it's any efforts that can be made to shine a spotlight on it is much welcome. I'm going to unmute. Irene has a question for you. Irene, do you want to unmute your microphone and ask the question? I think it's for Annemarie.
Yes. Am I unmuted now? Hello? Good.
Yes.
Hello, Marie. Hello, everyone. I was actually wondering from the perspective of language and the platform that Annemarie is trying to build and will appear in 2020. I'm just wondering if Annemarie thinks there is some kind of a risk in using the term empowerment vis-a-vis the other dimension or alternative of counseling in managing the expectations of those who don't want, let's say, to proceed with the surgery. So don't you think that there is some kind of an implied dichotomy or some as a way to tackle a misconception about those who choose not to out of psychological reason? I mean, and because they don't believe that part of their body equals or satisfies that need of womanhood as such, or sexual pleasure, and vis-a-vis the other who really consider it as, the surgery as part of restoring what is lost and what they perceive as lost. And I would like to.
No, thank you. This is a very good question, and also something I'm very much aware of, because I don't want to stigmatize the women who decide not to undergo the surgery. Like, you're not like what I would like to do is to provide more information and knowledge in a very objective and transparent way, because I feel that there is a knowledge gap. So this is the reason why I thought about establishing this knowledge platform, because I felt that the knowledge that I have, but also the knowledge that all the surgeons have that I know, almost all of them, since I do my work for the last 10 years, I thought, let's connect all the surgeons and spread the knowledge. That is actually the idea. And of course, I'm very much aware that you need to be really careful with the words that you use, how you present the knowledge, and how you share the data. And I'm very much aware of the fact that you need to be careful. And that's why I also take my time in order to think well how I would like to design the knowledge platform and the website. So I did use the word empowerment, but I meant it in a way that I am quite frustrated by the fact that the women who want to undergo the surgery are very often portrayed as vulnerable women, like people we need to protect in a way. Like, sometimes if you read some academic publications, I really feel like, you haven't spoken to the women who really want to undergo this operation, because those women are strong. They know exactly how their genitals look like. They have thought through this, and they want this operation very similar to women who want, for example, a breast augmentation, or who want a clitoral reconstructive, or who want a labiaplasty. Those women really want to do this operation. So that's why what I meant with empowerment, I wouldn't use empowerment in a way on my website or on the knowledge platform in any way that could stigmatize or, get the women who read I want everybody to read all the information without feeling attacked or stigmatized or have a feeling that they should make a specific choice. No, my website is not a flyer or a promotion of the surgery. That's not my intention. The aim is to share all the evidence. So I will provide links to all the articles that has been published. I will make a collection of all the YouTube movies that are existing and that I'm collecting right now, in order to, have one platform where all the evidence is available. So that's my aim. The reason is that I started my presentation with the article that I wrote in the Conversation UK. So I interviewed Marcy Bowers, and for some reason, I don't know how, this article was spread among blogs in Africa. And next to this article, my email address is written. So every 2-3 weeks, I do receive an email from a woman somewhere in Nigeria, Mauritania. This week I received an email from a lady in Sierra Leone requesting more information about the surgery. And I just want to, instead of writing them personally, I would like to have this knowledge platform providing information. So not pushing people to undergo the surgery, that's not my aim, but to give information on where they can undergo, where the surgery is offered in the world. What is the aim of the surgery? How long does the operation take? Can you undergo a surgery with type 1, 2, 3, or 4? You know, all these type of questions I would like to address. But again, I'm very much aware of the fact that the surgery is not a solution to the problem of many women, and that a thorough selection is key, that psychological care, sexual education is important. So this is the way how I see my platform, but also how I look at the surgery myself. And I hope that does answer your question.
Yes, Annemarie. I mean, this is really, this clarification was actually necessary, I believe. And I do admire this whole project being open up to the world, because indeed there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that this is a real struggle,
Yes.
struggle for everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before, there has been one more question. I'm looking at the time, and I think we could stay on all day, but we're running out of time. So there has been a question in relation to the kind of the surgery seeing patients from other countries such as the Middle East, Egypt, Iran, Oman. So it's a question to the doctors who performed the study. And there's also an answer from Petra or Cecilia, sorry, your name was come up as Petra, Cecilia, who says in Sweden they see women from Egypt, Oman, Iraqi, and her colleague has met someone from Iran. But Dr. Pierre, and then I might take the two last questions, and the last one is, what strategies do you use to identify the FGM survivors or victims, as put here? So Dr. Pierre and also Dr. Karim, like in your clinics, you come across, I know I've spoken to you on this, you come across survivors looking for the operation from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different countries. Is that correct?
This is for Karim. Question for Karim.
And also for you, Dr. Pierre.
Okay. So, yes, in fact, we operate more and more cases coming from unexpected countries like Iraq, Iran, the Borat cases. You heard about the Borat cases in India. So it's very difficult cases because it's a wrong type 4. It's a hidden type 2. So, and we start also operating from Indonesia cases and from Colombia also. So there are different cases. In those two countries, in Indonesia is close to type 4, but I will notice that an emerging issue is come from Guinea. Because, you know, the Guinea have a prevalence of 87%. And they are moving to type 4, but a wrong type 4, hidden type 2. So what is very interesting in those new cases, but we extend our knowledge of new cases of excision, different kind of excision, and we have to share this experience. So I applaud the creation of the platform knowledge. So we will share this, and we will go on in this, and this is new access to knowledge. Okay.
Just one follow-up question in relation to Colombia. Dr. Pierre, there's just a question on what type they practice in Colombia and also in Peru and Russia. I know they practice similar types, but can you explain the type they practice in Colombia?
Well, Colombia is usually type 2. It's the common type 2, very common, like in West Africa. in Russia, it is very various because you have so-called type 4, and we have really to focus on type 4 because it's an emerging issue, and type 4 recover many different cases, and we have to discuss on it.
Yeah, Dr. Curran, do you want to speak from your practice, the type of women that you're seeing?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. In Holland, we see basically more the African women because we have a big community of women from Africa. I have a few cases from Iran and Iraq, but I've not operated them yet. So I see small groups of Middle East.
That's very interesting. And there's one more question that I'm going to allow because it's quite interesting as well, and I think it will wrap up the conversation. But it's in relation to, so I'll just read it. There are communities who have very different views around womanhood. So in looking at the reconstructive surgery having negative connotations, how could we approach reconstructive surgery from an angle while the wider community, where conversations around pleasure and womanhood is very taboo? Are they informed of the benefits of the surgery? So I think this brings us back to, your presentation, Dr. Foldès, where you were talking about, the community involvement and how in the end this is about not the surgery but about preventing FGM. But what techniques or how can we engage, or how can we use the surgery maybe as a tool to engage communities on the wider the wider impact on FGM?
Oh, our experience of the community is in the countries itself of origin. So we use the technique as a tool, as a knowledge to explain really what's an excision. Because previously, in trying to struggle against FGM, we have not a scientific approach. This scientific approach may explain you can explain what really are the consequences, and it is very important to show the evidence from our experience, and this changed a lot. Namely, I had recently a conference with imams, worldwide imams, 200 imams. So imagine while trying to say only excision is bad. No, we changed the talk towards excision is this. You explain why you have such consequences. And they change completely the efficiency of what we say. So to know exactly what an excision is everything. It is very, very efficient when you talk to the communities.
Thank you. Annemarie, is there anything else you want to add in terms of this approach, or in terms of the kind of practicing communities you've come across who are seeking surgery?
No, I actually do not have much to add. So what Dr. Foldès said, that it's not only women from Africa, but from other countries as well, corresponds with my experience in other European countries as well. So yes, that's actually, I wanted to say something, but now I forgot. What did we talk about before? Well, maybe I will remember in a few seconds, but that was it. Thank you.
I am going to stop the questions there. I see a few more, and maybe we can answer each other in the comments, but this has been, I think, a super engaging and informative discussion. As someone said in the comments, it's really heartening to see so many people interested in this from across different countries and continents. I think what I've really taken out of this is the need to the need to share and to have more spaces, like what you are planning with the knowledge platform, Annemarie, I think is very much needed. Because there is a huge, I think when we talk about FGM more broadly and in the work that we do, there are so many misconceptions around FGM itself. And then when we start talking about clitoral reconstruction, it's only once again amplified, and there are a lot of opinions, there's a lot of media articles, and I think what we need to really bring it back to is what we always say, we need to bring it back to the women and the girls. We all want to end FGM, but we also need to protect and ensure that the 200 million women who are living with the consequences of FGM have access to the services, and it has minimum impact on the quality of their life, being survivors of gender-based violence. So I really think, what has come out, I think everyone agrees, and it's something that we need to, the message has been super strong around this holistic, or as Dr. Foldès said, a double holistic approach, that it's not, the surgery is not, it's not a solution. It's part of a broader package. And I think that's what we need to have discussions more on in Europe, that it can't be that in some European countries that people are like, no, the surgery, no, we're not doing it, there's no evidence. But in other countries, as we explained, it is part of the package that's offered. So we need to bring it together so that, the information is shared, and we're pushing each other and understanding why it can be so different. And I think we do need more evidence and more research, because we can always build on our research. If people want to scroll through the comments, Sarah has very kindly, just yesterday and this week alone, there have been 2 new articles published on the surgery and the effects of the surgery. So they're there in the comments. But I think ultimately what we need is to understand that even this is one of the things that one of our objectives as a network is to bridge that gap between, quite dense academic journals to policy to practice, because, we really need to break these studies down and understand what is the impact for women. So I think that as a network, we hope that this is only the first one of these. We hope maybe to reconvene again next year and to see how we can take the discussion forward. We will be following up with our members to see as the network what we can do. And we will also be very open if any of the researchers or the doctors who are on the line, we need information, information. Even I see here that women from Afghanistan, there's new information coming out, are practicing. Only in the last number of years have we seen Syrian women. We see ourselves as a network, as a platform where we have a helicopter view of what's going on in Europe, and we really need to gather this information. So if you come across something that you believe would be interesting to us, please email it to us, and then we can also link you in maybe with researchers or organizations who are doing more work in the area which you work in. But yeah, just to thank everyone, but I think the biggest thanks goes out to Dr. Annemarie Middelburg and Dr. Pierres Foldès for really taking the time to present and to prepare presentations. And I really think that hopefully this webinar will be the start of a bigger conversation on this topic. So thank you so much for your time. And we will also be doing a short report and gathering, some of the comments that have come up and gathering some of the questions. So we will be able to share that as well. So thank you so much.